Namaste, Ni Hao. A very warm welcome to each one of you present here today. It gives us immense pleasure to extend our heartfelt greetings to all our distinguished guests, dignitaries, and respected faculty members, scholars who've gathered here for the 18th All India Conference of Chinese Studies, hosted by the Indian Institute of Management Indore in collaboration with the Institute of Chinese Studies, Delhi.
Indeed, it's a moment of great pride and honor for IIM Indore to host this prestigious conference. Established in 1996, IIM Indore has over the years emerged as a pioneer in innovative pedagogy, social consciousness, and global engagement. Guided by its motto, Siddhi Moolam Prabandhanam, meaning the root of all achievement lies in management, the Institute continues to nurture leaders who are not just competent but also compassionate, ethical, and globally minded. Under the visionary leadership of our director, Professor Himanshu Rai, IIM Indore has expanded its footprints across India and abroad. It has become a hub for dialogue and learning where ideas from the East and West converge, where management meets humanity, and where research transforms into real-world impact. Hosting the 18th All India Conference of China Studies today reinforces IIM Indore's commitment to promoting global academic cooperation, cross-cultural understanding, and meaningful engagement with contemporary geopolitical issues.
Since its inception, the All India Conference of Chinese Studies has served as a unique platform where academics, diplomats, and thought leaders come together to shape insights, explore evolving global realities, and engage in constructive discussions on the bilateral, regional, and multilateral dimensions of the India-China relationship. This 18th edition continues that tradition of dialogue and learning, bringing together voices that reflect both depth of scholarship and diversity of perspective. Today's inaugural session marks not just the beginning of a conference, but a continuation of a long-standing conversation between two civilizations with a shared history, rich culture, and intertwined destinies.
To commence this auspicious occasion, we seek the blessings of the Goddess of Knowledge, Wisdom, and Learning, Ma Saraswati, along with the act of lighting the lamp, which is an age-old Indian tradition that marks the formal inauguration of an auspicious event. To kindle the lamp, we now invite onto the dais our esteemed director, Professor Himanshu Rai, along with ICCS Director Alka Acharya, Ambassador Ashok Kekanta, and Convener Professor Venkat, and Co-convenor Aravind Yelleri.
इंदु तुषार हार धवला या शुभ्रवस्त्रावृता या वीणावरदण्डमण्डितकरा या श्वेतपद्मासना या ब्रह्माच्युत शंकर प्रभृतिभिः देवैः सदा वन्दिता सा मां पातु सरस्वती भगवती निःशेषजाड्यापहा.
Formally inaugurate the 18th All India Conference of Chinese Studies, we are now honored to invite our director, Professor Himanshu Rai, to deliver the inaugural address. Professor Himanshu Rai is the director of IIM Indore, under whose leadership the institute has earned prestigious Triple Crown accreditation, AMBA, AACSB, and ICCS, placing it among the top 100 institutions globally. An alumnus of IIM Ahmedabad and KREC Surat, he has previously served as the Dean of SDA Bocconi India, taught at SDA Bocconi Milan, IIM Lucknow, and XLRI, and worked for over 8 years with Tata Steel, continuing to quality systems and communication policies. He's the author of the best-selling book Negotiation, the Hindi spiritual book Prava, and the book titled Organizational Behavior with McShane and Von Glenor. He's also the co-author of the recently launched book Brand India, Story of Bharat in a Changing World, which explores India's journey towards 2047 and provides a comprehensive perspective on how India is emerging as a global brand deeply rooted in culture, innovation, and sustainability. With experience in training over 50,000 professionals in leadership and negotiation, Professor Rai has consulted with the Government of India, state governments, the World Bank, and various industries.
He holds leadership and advisory roles, including chairperson of the Indore Management Association, advisory board member at Durban University of Technology and ESC Claremont, and member of government committees such as Vision at the Rate for 2047 and the Indian Knowledge System. He also serves as an independent director and startup advisor. Professor Rai founded the Center for Conflict Management, which works with youth across countries on intrapersonal and interpersonal conflicts. Recognized with awards such as the NTSC Scholarship, Infosys Fellowship, and the LMA Outstanding Management Professional Award 2022, he has also been named among India's 25 most influential voices by LinkedIn and the top 10 motivational speakers by Medium.com. Beyond academics, he practices and teaches yoga and is passionate about trekking and mountaineering, having scaled Kilimanjaro, Everest Base Camp, Kalapathar, among others. He has also skydived from 13,000 feet and completed the world's longest zip line. A multifaceted personality, he is an avid quizzer, dramatist, music lover, and book collector. Sir, it is our privilege to invite you to share your thoughts and officially inaugurate the 18th All India Conference for China Studies.
Just in case you're wondering that I also do some work here, I do actually. I've tried a lot, but somehow my introduction doesn't seem to be getting any shorter. And please pardon me for a bad throat, but yesterday I was in Delhi and I made the cardinal mistake of breathing outdoors. Namaste, Nin hao. A very good morning to all of you. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome you to the 18th edition of the All India Conference of China Studies, AICCS, in collaboration with the Institute of Chinese Studies, Delhi, which has been the driving force behind this conference since 2006. As we gather here today, it is pertinent to reflect on the words of our Prime Minister, who recently emphasized the importance of India-China relations. He stated, and I quote, "Stable, predictable, constructive ties between India and China will contribute significantly to regional as well as global peace and prosperity," unquote. This vision highlights the potential of our nations to lead by example in promoting peace and stability on the global stage. Drawing from our rich cultural heritage, we find resonance in the ancient Sanskrit shlok, "Sarve bhavantu sukhinah, sarve santu niramayah, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschid dukbhag bhavet." May all beings be happy, may all be free from disease, may all see auspiciousness, may no one suffer in any which way. This shlok encapsulates the essence of our approach towards international relations, a commitment to the well-being and prosperity of all, transcending borders and differences. It reflects a spirit of cooperation and mutual respect that both our nations strive to uphold. And that's what IIM Indore is all about as well. Here we believe in the transformative power of education, not merely as preparation for the marketplace, but as a force that shapes society, informs policy, and contributes to global progress. Our mission is to develop leaders who excel in their professional pursuits while being mindful of their responsibility to the society and the world. What makes IIM Indore unique is our commitment to bridging management with broader societal and global concerns. We actively engage with the humanities, social sciences, public policy, and international relations. In this context, hosting the All India Conference of China Studies aligns perfectly with our philosophy of going beyond boundaries, geographical, intellectual, and cultural. Specifically, IIM Indore has established collaborations with two leading Chinese universities, promoting joint research, student exchanges, and cross-cultural learning. These partnerships are just the beginning, and we are actively working to expand our global network further. Additionally, our students and faculty participate in special interest groups, research clusters, and policy-focused forums that explore China, Asia, and the global economic trends, nurturing a deeper understanding of the dynamics of this region. Thus, for us, this conference is more than an academic event. It is a reflection for our ongoing commitment to being a hub of ideas, where scholars from around the world and India come together to debate, learn, and envision the future. Your presence here today underscores the growing recognition that understanding China is essential for us to engage with the evolving global order. So together, as we embark on the deliberations of this conference, let us seek pathways that lead to mutual understanding, shared growth, and most importantly, lasting peace. When we speak of India and China, we're not speaking of just two countries. We are speaking of the two world's most ancient civilizations. Civilizations that have shaped philosophies, trade, art, and knowledge for millennia. Both nations share a deep cultural and civilizational continuity, with rich traditions in philosophy, literature, art, and architecture that have influenced not only their societies, but the wider Asian region. India and China both emphasize the harmony between humans, society, and nature, reflected in the principles of dharma, karma, and ahimsa in India, and Confucianism and Taoism in China. This shared moral and philosophical foundation gives both nations a profound sense of resilience, ethical responsibility, and a long-term vision. Our historical ties run deep, not just in philosophy, but also in tangible exchanges. Buddhism traveled from India to China, shaping Chinese thought, art, and education. The Silk Road and the maritime trade routes facilitated the movements of goods, ideas, and technologies, from silk and spices to scientific knowledge. Both nations have long traditions of agrarian societies and rural communities, emphasizing community welfare and local governance, values that continue to strengthen social cohesion today. These civilization exchanges have left a legacy of mutual learning and interconnectedness that remains a source of strength in navigating even contemporary challenges. In the modern world, India and China are two of the fastest growing large economies and central to global conversations on trade, technology, and sustainability. Both countries draw on a history of innovation. India, with its contribution in mathematics, astronomy, and medicine, and China with its compass, paper making, and engineering advances. Today, the shared understanding and emphasis on knowledge compete and collaborate in emerging technologies, and they allow technological progression. They allow India and China to both compete as well as collaborate in emerging technologies, renewable energy, and global infrastructure development. Our capacity to harness human capital, scale solutions, and innovate across disciplines is a shared strength that can benefit not just our nations, but the entire world. Together, India and China possess remarkable governance traditions with long histories of organized bureaucracy, civil services, and educational systems that promote social mobility and meritocracy. Our rich artistic and cultural expressions, poetry, literature, performing arts, festivals, rituals, all of them create a deep social cohesion and collective identity. When combined With our shared commitment to education, research, and global engagement, these cultural and institutional strengths provide a solid foundation for India and China to contribute meaningfully to global stability, sustainable growth, and technological advancement. As our ancient wisdom reminds us, 𝐕𝐞𝐧𝐤 kutumbakam, the world is one family. India and China, drawing on these civilizational strengths and shared values, have the opportunity not just to lead individually, but to shape globalization responsibly, ethically, and sustainably, ensuring that our choices benefit not only our nations, but the wider world. And thus, for India, understanding China is not optional, it is essential. We must approach this understanding not through simplistic narratives, but through rigorous research, informed debate, and nuanced perspectives. That is precisely what AICCS has sought to nurture since its inception, and what IIM Indore is proud to contribute to this year. But why this theme? And why now? Well, the theme of this year's conference, Rewiring Globalization, the China factor in trade, technology, and sustainability in a multipolar world, is both timely and urgent because of globalization. The world is witnessing profound shifts in how goods, capital, technology, and even ideas flow across borders. The pandemic disrupted supply chains and highlighted vulnerabilities. Trade wars and protectionist policies have challenged assumptions of seamless global integration. Technology, by the way, which was once seen as a unifying force, has become a domain of competition, even confrontation. Climate change has forced us to rethink growth models and pursue sustainability as a collective imperative and not an individual one. At the center of many of these dynamics stands China. Over the past 4 decades, China has integrated into the global economy at an unprecedented speed and scale. Its manufacturing capacity, its dominance in renewable energy technologies, its leadership in 5G and artificial intelligence, and the BRI, the Belt and Road Initiative, each of these has reshaped the contours of globalization. At the same time, our India, with its demographic dividend, growing technological ecosystem, renewable energy ambitions, and tradition of democratic deliberation, is actively shaping the rules as well as the pathways of globalization. India is simultaneously a market, an innovator, and a partner in global initiatives, leveraging its strength to foster sustainable growth and resilient supply chains. These shifts, to me, raise some critical questions for both the countries and the world. What happens when global supply chains depend excessively on one country? How can nations balance the benefits of interdependence with the risks of vulnerability? Can technological ecosystems remain open and collaborative when they are increasingly weaponized for strategic advantage? And critically, can globalization be rewired to support sustainability, equity, and shared prosperity, not just growth? These are some of the questions I think our scholars are going to answer in the next 3 days. Answering these questions requires both scholarly depth and policy imagination, which is precisely why this conference matters. Because India and China are both major actors with the power to co-shape globalization in ways that are sustainable, inclusive, and mutually beneficial. Rather than merely adapting to external rules, India and China together have the potential to co-create a new global order, demonstrating that collaboration, competition, and shared responsibility can coexist. Rewiring globalization, therefore, is about crafting a new vision of global interdependence, one that is more inclusive, resilient, and sustainable. This is where scholarship, plays a very pivotal role. Rigorous research in China helps India not only to navigate challenges, but also to seize opportunities, build partnerships, and design strategies that align with our national interest while contributing to global stability. But it's also important to know that when we say rewiring, we evoke an image of restructuring, of designing anew, of creating connections differently. Globalization is not ending, it is getting rewired. The rewiring has several dimensions. Economic, supply chains are being reconfigured for resilience rather than just efficiency. Technological, standards and platforms are emerging as arenas of strategic contestation. Sustainability, growth must now be balanced with climate commitments, renewable energy, and most importantly, responsible consumption. And cultural. In a multipolar world, we must embrace diversity in values and models rather than assuming that one path fits everybody. Seen this way, the China factor is not just about economics or geopolitics. It is about how globalization itself is being reshaped and how India, along with other nations, can influence that process. This is where conferences like this provide the stage for this exchange of new ideas and serve three essential purposes. First, they generate new insight into China's domestic policies, foreign policy, technological innovations, and its role in sustainability. Second, they provide evidence-based perspectives that can inform India's policymakers and business leaders. And third, they create a space for dialogue, reducing stereotypes and enabling more nuanced engagement between scholars, practitioners, and nations. As we embark on this 3-day journey, I encourage all of you, all the participants, to engage actively, to challenge assumptions, and to share not only just your research, but also your reflections. Conferences are not about presenting what we know. They are about identifying what we still need to learn. I hope that over the course of this gathering, you will forge collaborations, generate fresh ideas, and deepen your commitment to advancing China studies in India. I also hope that you will take away a little of I Am Indore's spirit, the spirit of openness, the spirit of curiosity, and the spirit of cultural inclusivity that defines our institution. In the spirit of knowledge and its transformative power, I'm reminded of a classical shlok from 𝐸𝐴𝐵. Vidyam cha yastad vedobhyam sah avidyaya mrityum tirtva vidyaya jivan mashnute. One who understands both knowledge and ignorance transcends death through ignorance and attains life through knowledge. This shlok captures the essence of our gathering. Knowledge, when shared and applied, empowers, enlightens, and sustains communities as well as nations. It reminds us that we discuss here, the ideas we exchange, and the collaborations we build are not only for intellectual enrichment, they are tools to create meaningful impact on societies and onto the entire world. Once again, on behalf of the Indian Institute of Management Indore, I extend a warm welcome to each of you. May this conference be intellectually stimulating, personally rewarding, and globally significant. Thank you very much. 𝐶𝐶 Om Shanti.
Thank you so much, sir, for that deeply inspiring address. Your words beautifully encapsulate the spirit of dialogue and collaboration that this conference stands for.
It now gives us great pleasure to welcome Professor Alka Acharya, Director of the Institute of Chinese Studies. Professor Acharya is one of India's foremost scholars on Chinese politics and foreign policy. Her extensive research and contributions have shaped academic and policy conversations on Sino-Indian relations. She is also a member of several academic and strategic forums that aim to deepen cross-border understanding. She was professor and chairperson at the Center for East Asian Studies, School of International Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, teaching courses in Chinese foreign policy and political economy to the master's and MPhil students, and guiding doctoral research scholars since 1993, from where she superannuated in March 2025. From 2005 to 2013, she was the editor of the journal China Report, a journal of East Asian Studies, and had an earlier stint as a full-time director and senior fellow of the Institute of Chinese Studies from 2014 to 2017. She was nominated by the Indian government as a member of the India-China Eminent Persons Group from 2006 to 2008 and was a member of the National Security Advisory Board of the Government of India for 2 terms from 2006 and 2008 to 2011 and 2012. Her current research focuses on India-China-Russia trilateral cooperation and comparing Indian and Chinese strategies of regional engagement. Ma'am, we are truly honored by your presence here today. We invite you to deliver the inaugural remarks and set the stage for deliberations that will follow.
Namaskar, 18ᵗ and good morning to all of you who have gathered here today. Our chairperson of the Institute of Chinese Studies, Professor Srimati Chakrabarti, Director IIM Indore, 𝐕𝐞𝐧𝐤, our keynote speaker was also formerly director of the Institute of Chinese Studies, Ambassador Ashok. The 2 conveners, one on stage, one off stage, Venkat and Arvind. I will not give you your formal titles, you are my students. Very, very happy to see you now take charge of this immensely significant, extremely important initiative for promoting China studies in the country that was initiated, as was pointed out, by the director, IIM Indore, in 2006. He has, of course, made my task immensely easier by setting the stage, providing you with the conceptual framework that informed our approach to this particular conference. It is my extremely proud and privileged duty to express on behalf of the Institute our thanks and our confidence about taking this initiative forward with greater strength from here on. The 18th AICCS, 18 is a very, very important number. If the AICCS was a person, it would have voted. And you can guess what the AICCS would have voted for. It would have voted for the provision of a resource base so stable and so significant that we could set up China Studies departments, China Studies research groups all over the country. What the director just said, that these are not just 2 countries, these are civilizations who have forgotten the art of understanding and speaking and infusing each other. What we need to do now is to start that process of understanding all over again. And this I say after completing a more than 3 decades career in the study, research and promotion of China studies. I can say that we have not even begun to scratch the surface of understanding China. If you want to say what is our biggest challenge today, and the director did phrase it in a certain manner, I would say that the biggest challenge for India is not just China, but it is about understanding China. How are we understanding it? And here I would like to say that this All India Conference of China Studies has attempted to address that huge challenge. The USP of the AICCS is that it does not, of course, believe in trying to do things by themselves. Of course, it was Ekla Chalo Re. We started off at a time when there was no research institute devoted to understanding and promoting China studies in the country. And I'm proud to say that in our, as we have grown and as we have emerged more than 50 years, we have contributed to creating a platform where we bring together scholars, researchers, policymakers, thought leaders, public intellectuals, and we have attempted to broaden, as you said, broaden this conversation not just among scholars, but this interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary infusion of different kinds of thinking and ideas. And this platform, therefore, is unique. Unique in the sense that nowhere else do we have a conference that travels across the country, bringing together the best and the brightest of scholars. And again, the second USP of this is that we try to bring together younger, emerging scholars who have just started to get their feet wet, as it were, in this field, and who benefit immensely from the engagements that they get from the senior intellectuals, senior scholars, policymakers. The director also said that, it is very important that we have scholarly research and policy imagination here. Again, the AICCS sees this not as binaries. It sees an immensely dialectical interaction between scholarly research and policy imagination. Unless you have that scholarly base and the foundation, policy cannot imagine. And therefore, the intention, objective of the AICCS has always been to partner with, and if we look at the history of these 18 conferences, you will see that we have gone to public universities, to private universities, to IITs, to IIMs. We are also trying to now expand this to include wider institutional collaboration. In other words, for this time, we have managed to bring some of the respected members of the foreign policy establishment. They were always a part of these engagements, and we were fortunate to have support from the Ministry of External Affairs for a long time, and we hope that that support will continue. Because one thing that we have understood, that without the kind of resources that the state on the one hand can provide, and now the business leaders and the commercial kind of sections who are beginning to get interested in China, the kind of resources they can bring together, it's impossible to conduct China studies in a serious, meaningful fashion. Because unlike other kinds of research, China studies requires a basic, irreducible minimum period of immersion. You need to know the language. You need to go to the field and get a sense of what China is all about. You need to be able to uncover the layers. Just as somebody from China comes to India, they have to unpeel us, unpack us hugely. This kind of 7 to 8 to 10 years that are required to establish some kind of hold about China, on China, requires resources. Our public universities are unfortunately not in a position to provide us with the kind of resources that can enable us to send our students for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years to China. The state's investment is also unfortunately seen a decline in Chinese studies over the period. And therefore, IIM becomes very, very meaningful for us in the sense that we hope we can tap, through your institution, business leaders, people who are obviously looking at the opportunities that China provides in commerce and business, to understand the importance of creating that critical mass of experts on China, which can provide us with that scholarly depth and therefore fuel the policy imagination. It's on the track. And here, the AICCS in its own humble way, with our modest resources, have managed to place a fairly impressive footprint on the Indian university and institutional landscape. We are extremely thankful to the IIM Indore, the director, and Professor Venkataraman for giving us such immense belief in their belief in this venture, and for providing us with the kind of resources, helping us to conceptualize this in a way which I hope will fire the imaginations of the young people here, bring together very impressive cast of people for providing their own inputs and their ideas, and setting the stage in a very, very impressive, comfortable surroundings for taking this 18th chapter of AICCS forward. 18 years in retrospect will be a small step, but each step takes us further and further to our goal of creating that body of scholarship in this country, which is truly the need of the hour. I thank you all once again, and wish that we have plenty of arguments. The more arguments, the better. I will just enjoy when people say, I'm sorry, I don't agree with you, or you are not really taking into account certain things. Those are the kind of conferences that I'm looking forward to people coming with their own contestations. And well, as he said, use this opportunity to network, because above all, the AICCS ends with this fantastic network. And all of you who are interested in expanding your network beyond this, please, we have our Assistant Director here, Snigdha, who will provide you access to this larger pool of scholars across the country, many of whom couldn't come. And therefore, may the tribe grow and expand and increase. Thank you all very much once again. There will be a formal vote of thanks. I really have no words to, so I will expect the thanks to be more formally done, but from the bottom of my heart, I thank you all. It has been a huge, huge exercise putting this together, and I look forward to the next 2.5 days. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Acharya, for your profound words and for so eloquently capturing the essence of mutual learning and shared progress.
To take the proceedings forward, I now invite Professor G. Venkataraman, convener of the 18th All India Conference of China Studies, to welcome the gathering. Professor Raman, a faculty of IIM Indore, whose work has been central to fostering academic dialogue between India and China, his scholarly engagement with China studies and his commitment to strengthening bilateral understanding through research and education have been instrumental in shaping this annual conference. A trained sinologist, he completed his PhD from the School of Government Peking University under the India-China Cultural Exchange Program. He is a recipient of the Nehru Memorial Fellowship and has been a postdoctoral fellow in Fudan University, Shanghai. These experiences shaped his long-standing engagement with China's state society dynamics, political economy, and role in global governance. Dr. Venkat's research interests lie at the intersection of China studies, multilateralism, and the global south, and business ethics and pedagogy. He has co-edited Locating Bricks in the Global Order and contributes commentaries on China, geopolitics, and international business to leading platforms. As a sinologist, geopolitics observer, and teacher, Dr. Venkat combines scholarship with academic leadership and track to engagement with a vision to strengthen India-China dialogue and contribute to debates on trade, technology, and sustainability in a multipolar world. Sir, we invite you to share your thoughts and your vision for this year's conference.
Esteemed Director, Professor 𝐕𝐞𝐧𝐤, esteemed Director of ICS, Professor Alka Acharya, a very distinguished guest amongst us, Ambassador Ashok Kanta, and my dear colleagues and scholars and some of our students. gives me great pleasure to stand here and deliver the welcome address as convener of the Institute of China, as a convener of All India Conference of China Studies. In the 1990s, when China announced itself to the world, its leadership spoke about, the peaceful rise of China. They called it 18ᵗʰ AICCS. Now, when the West saw this whole, ambition of China in the form of 18ᵗʰ AICCS, the West was alarmed a bit. But China, in all its modesty, said, no, we are not going to threaten you. Please, don't be scared of us. And to assuage, those concerns, China said, no 18ᵗʰ AICCS, no peaceful rise, peaceful development. So 18ᵗ. But then, today, we see that rise is there, and China is not at all disturbed by concerns of the West. It's not concerned whether you call it development, whether you call it rise. But one thing is for sure, it is definitely not peaceful. 18ᵗ is definitely not there. And that has given rise to a new age of great power competition. In this age of great power competition, people are talking about, what shape this great power competition is going to take place. With China openly now saying that we are no more going to be norm takers, we are going to be norm makers. And therefore, China is all out there to rewire globalization. So when we are talking about the fate of globalization, some call it that we are entering a phase of deglobalization, where parallelly you see resurgence of economic nationalism. Some call it globalization, and some others call, if at all we are witnessing end of globalization, it is end of globalization inspired by the US-led West. What it is going to get replaced by is a globalization, new form of globalization to be led by, new powers like China and India. And so I always believe, I tell my students, and wherever I get the chance to contribute my 2 cents, I always say that if India is to attain its pride of place in 21st century, one of the biggest challenges it faces is to deal with the challenge of understanding China. How do you deal with this monster called China, which has suddenly erupted itself into so much of prominence with tremendous speed and scale? Just to give an example of speed and scale, just 2 days back I was reading that this is speed for China. So the Nürburgring, race, it's called the Green Hell. It's a 13-mile course in the mountainous terrains in West Germany. Now, Xiaomi, which actually got into the act of manufacturing electric cars, and the first one it manufactured was in 2024, and then it participated in 2025, and the electric car of Xiaomi actually ended up being the 3rd fastest, electric or otherwise, in the history of this competition. And in this competition, till now, the cars which were dominated by traditional Western European companies, they were the ones who always had the central action. But this is speed for you. And if you're talking of scale, let's take the case of the energy sector. Today, China accounts for more than half of world's installed solar and wind capacity combined. Today, 3/4 of renewable energy projects currently underway worldwide are either in China or being driven by Chinese contractors. 30% of global emissions come from China, but ironically, so too does much of growth in decarbonization technology. But this speed and scale has come at a cost. China is suffering from overproduction capacities, which we call nature, involution, massive debt levels, the crisis fueled by the real estate crisis, COVID, and to a certain extent, a leadership hell-bent on changing the rules of the game. So therefore, China today has completely disrupted this, the post-Second World War order, and therefore the great power competition. We could not have got the timing of this conference better, where recently, once again, Indian leadership has started at the highest level engaging with China and see what all possibilities of collaboration can take place. So it is what you call competitive collaboration of sorts. And just yesterday, the fourth plenum of the 20th Central Committee concluded unveiling China's ambitions to achieve its socialist modernization plan, with the prominent objective of issuing the proposals for the 15th five-year plan, which they call the 𝐀𝐤𝐴. So the significant proposals in the 15th year plan include that China aspires to achieve significant achievements in high-quality productive forces, substantial improvements in science and tech self-reliance, further advances in strengthening national security shield, and strive to take leading position in science and tech development and seize commanding heights of science and technology, which in Chinese is called 18ᵗʰ AICCS. So we can't have a better conference theme than the one which we thought of. The stars have completely aligned to justify what we emphasized under the leadership of the director a year back when he was giving the vote of thanks in the 17th AICCS. It was he who actually said that we should be doing something which would be related to globalization and the China factor in trade, technology, and sustainability. And here we are. So this conference theme is very apt, as we see. And this conference has seen unprecedented 160 abstract submissions. It has never happened earlier. Out of this 160, we got 81 papers selected. And out of those 81, there was 2 rounds of peer review. And then we finally, including one panel proposal, we came down to 36. And so we have 10 thematic panels, and we have 5 special panels, which is basically going to witness participation of some of the leading scholars and leading corporate professionals. The CEO of Ace Micromatic International, my good friend Raghu Ramchandran, is there. CEO of Fuku Mobile, Ravi Shankar Bose, he has come from China all the way. And then we have I. Fani Kumar, who has just recently retired, and he has been in China for 17 years, heading the State Bank of India and ICICI operations. Then we have one of the most thorough and distinguished academicians amongst us, Professor Vellamuri Ramakrishna. So I'm sure you will have a lot to chew in the next 3 days with such eminent people spending their very valuable time to come and attend this conference. Although the vote of thanks is due, and my co-convenor is going to perform that duty, but I take the liberty of thanking from the bottom of my heart my director, Professor Himanshu Rai, for his unconditional support in organizing this conference. I also thank ICS director for agreeing to have the conference in Indore. It's a strange coincidence that in 2013, when I hosted the All India Conference of China Studies in Kozhikode, Ambassador Ashok Kanta was about to take the role of Indian ambassador to China that time. And strangely, 12 years later, again we are having this conference in Indore, and again he is the keynote speaker and the chief guest. Very warm welcome to all of you to this conference. My sincere request to all the participants is be part of the sessions, various sessions as much as possible. A lot of hard work has gone into it. And Indore Sarafa Bazaar starts after 9 p.m. And so it's not too late in Indore to enjoy Indore. So please be part of the sessions and make the most out of it. And welcome all. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Professor Raman, for that warm and insightful address. Your leadership and commitment have been the guiding force behind this conference's successful implementation. We would now like to request our Director, Sir Professor Rai, and ICS Director, Professor Alkacharya, to unveil the Book of Abstracts, and Ambassador Ashok K. Kanta to unveil the Book of Abstracts.
It is now time for the keynote address of the inaugural ceremony. It is a distinct honor to welcome Mr. Ashok K. Kanta, former Ambassador of India to the People's Republic of China and former Director of the Institute of Chinese Studies, New Delhi. He is also Honorary Fellow of the Institute of Chinese Studies, a Distinguished Fellow of the Vivekananda Institute Foundation, Distinguished Fellow, Council for Strategic and Defense Research, and Chair of the Core Group on China of the Confederation of Indian Industry. Sir's distinguished diplomatic career spans over 4 decades, during which he has held several key distinct positions, including High Commissioner to Malaysia and Secretary East in the Ministry of External Affairs. His deep understanding of China and the Indo-Pacific region has made him one of the most respected voices in India's foreign policy discourse. Sir, we are privileged to have you among us today. We invite you to deliver the keynote address and share your insights on the theme of this year's All India Conference of China Studies.
Professor 𝐕𝐶𝐻, Director, I am Indore, Professor �ശ്രീമതി Chakrabarti, Chairperson ICS, Professor 𝐒𝐿𝐵, Director ICS, Professor G. Venkatraman, Convener of the conference, Dr. 𝐕𝐶𝐻 AICCS, Co-convenor, and all esteemed friends present here. Let me first of all thank Professor 𝐕𝐶𝐻 for inviting me to deliver the keynote address at this 18th edition of All India Conference of China Studies. For me, it's a distinct privilege and honor to deliver these remarks, even though I'm a little daunted by 3 previous speakers, ground they have already covered. Professor 𝐈𝐍 has very eloquently stated that this conference matters. And he has also posed some key questions we'll be deliberating over the next 3 days. And Alka, in her own inimitable style, spoke from heart, talked about, again, why AICCS matters. And it matters especially at this point of time. I'll dwell on that later, when India-China relations are in a way being rebuilt. This gathering, in fact, comes at a very pivotal moment, both for India-China relations and indeed for global order. As we convene, the world grapples with fractured supply chains, technological rivalries, and sustainability imperatives, Professor 𝐈𝐍 referred to, all profoundly shaped by China's ascent and its ambitions, as also disruptions caused by one gentleman sitting in White House who decided yesterday to dismantle east wing of that monumental building. But in fact, he's dismantling much more than one, annexe of White House. In a way, he's dismantling international trade order and certain core components of global order as we have known. So today, amidst these disruptions, this churn and unpredictability, we have to reimagine several things, including globalization. Globalization is not going away, but it has to be sort of reimagined under changed circumstances. I'll share my thoughts on India-China relations, on China's adaptive resilience and contradictions, on its innovation-led growth path, perils of looking at China through borrowed lenses. And this is a theme we keep, hammering away at every AICCS and other occasions. And implications of all these developments for India's own quest for development, our transition towards what we call 𝐕𝐞𝐧𝐻 Bharat by 2047, and strategic autonomy. Venkat reminded me, a few days ago, and he just referred to that, this happy coincidence that, in fact, the first AICCS attended was way back in December 2013, when I was preparing to move to Beijing to take on my assignment as ambassador to China. And that time also I was invited to deliver a keynote address at another IIM. It's so nice to return to IIM. I'm Indore in this case, and sir, to your beautiful campus, an institution with a very formidable reputation, a reputation which has grown in a very significant manner during your stewardship during the last 7 years or so. What is less satisfying for me is the state of India-China relations today compared to what we had in 2013 when I last addressed AICCS in this capacity. My tenure in China was fulfilling. Ambassadors have to be lucky also, apart from putting in hard work. I was a lucky ambassador. So we had, visits of, very unusual visits of President Xi Jinping to India, where Prime Minister Modi travelled to Ahmedabad to receive him in September 2014, and in May 2015, the Prime Minister travelled to Xi'an, President Xi's hometown, and President Xi spent an entire day in Xi'an, part of what was later called hometown diplomacy. So it was a period of hope, possibilities and progress in India-China relations. Relations appeared to be on even keel, but even at that time, in fact, we were warning that dark clouds are building up, that there are structural challenges in the relationship which, if not addressed, could lead to a sharp downturn. As it happened, unfortunately, there was a serious downturn. I'll not dwell on Chinese transgressions in eastern Ladakh in the summer of 2020 and their serious consequences for bilateral relations. I was going through my speaking notes for 6th AICCS in December 2013 on this laptop, and I was struck that in my remarks I had mentioned not once but twice the imperative of ensuring that peace and tranquility is maintained along borders, and that if that does not happen, the equilibrium in India-China relations will be upset. In fact, I had quoted Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh's media statement of 23rd of October 2013 during his last visit to China as Prime Minister. and he had mentioned, I quote, "We agreed that peace and tranquility on our borders must remain the foundation for growth in India-China relationship, even as we move forward the negotiations towards a fair, reasonable and mutually acceptable settlement to the India-China boundary question. This will be our strategic benchmark." Unfortunately, this shared understanding, this sage counsel coming from Prime Minister of India was ignored by the Chinese side, and you're aware of what happened there. So, the entire rubric, paradigm, framework, which had provided undergirding for India-China relations was in fact buried in the treacherous terrain of Galwan in June 2020, when, as you're aware, we had fatalities on both sides. Now, through strenuous efforts, a modicum of stability has been restored in the relationship, but we are far from arriving at normalcy, either along borders or in overall relations with our two countries. Prime Minister's two meetings with President Xi at Kazan, Russia in October last year, and more recently in Tianjin, China, have helped start a process of rebuilding a badly bruised and damaged relationship. But objective at this point of time, as Professor Rai rightly pointed out, is relatively limited. Prime Minister told Foreign Minister Wang Yi when he called on him that we want stable, predictable and constructive relationship, as you recalled. In the meantime, the two countries are rightly prioritizing resumption of people-centric contacts and economic engagement. It's quite limited at this point of time. But at the same time, do we discern a dual-track approach? Both sides acknowledge that the border issue has returned to the center of India-China discourse. It cannot be wished away. The Chinese do try to downplay its salience in the relationship. So we have decided to explore what is called early harvest in boundary settlement. As a former border negotiator, I have my deep anxieties about that particular initiative, but I'll not speak on that today. Returning to people-centric contacts, I'm happy that direct flights will be resumed very soon. Visas are being facilitated, academic contacts, exchanges are being renewed. It's particularly important that normal scholarly exchanges and field visits are restored as early as possible. In fact, I was speaking to some young scholar last evening, asking, is she planning a field visit? Well, at present, unfortunately, that's not possible, but I hope that will become possible soon. China, as previous speakers noted, is a challenge for us. It's to my mind, the most important, most formidable strategic challenge. And it's absolutely essential that we understand China. As you know, the previous speakers very rightly pointed out, and we should not do that. I'll again use that term, borrowed lenses, and we tend to do it all the time. India's geopolitical imperatives demand homegrown frameworks that fuse granular evidence with holistic analysis. We need both. The border situation we have with China is unique, and I've been a border negotiator for a very long time. Cannot be replicated anywhere else. The pattern of bilateral economic engagements with China, while they derive from China's broader external economic behavior, has its own peculiarities which remain understudied. We really don't have many scholars who are working on that. And as Alka said, we need to start afresh on understanding each other. So it's a daunting task before us. And we need to frame China within India's strategic autonomy and multipolar vision, rather than eco-Western alliance structures which are under stress at this point of time. In fact, I'm not even sure that the construct of US-led West, to what extent it's durable. We are, as Director pointed out, we are at a reordering point in geopolitical landscape, which is impacting how we deal with China. So-called liberal rule-based international order, long dominated by the US, is facing unprecedented challenges, if not sort of going through its death throes. As I mentioned earlier, Mr. Trump has taken a wrecking ball not only to White House but to international order as well. Increasingly, in midst of this uncertainty, we are coming to the conclusion that reinforcing our multi-domain deterrence vis-a-vis China must be prioritized, even while we explore constructive engagement with our largest neighbor with a heavy dose of realism. What is possible, what is not possible. In the current geopolitical environment, the earlier expectation of external balancing of China will have to be very carefully reassessed, as there are serious doubts now about India's strategic partnership with the US. So to what extent India can derive support from US-led West in balancing China, that's an open question. We have undoubtedly benefited from formidable Western scholarship on China, but we are also aware of the fact that they tend to be error-prone in their assessments of China, and more importantly, they suffer from perspective bias. They are looking at China from their own perspective. Our perspective is very different. So let me draw attention to some fallacies afflicting assessments of China in the West, in India, beyond, because that's really important when we're trying to understand that country afresh. There is, of course, more like us fallacy, which is currently in the retreat in the USA, but it was a very powerful trend until, in fact, first term of President Donald Trump, when West felt that post-reform economic liberalization of China will lead to political liberalization, democratization, making China more like us. Honestly, we never subscribed to that. We found that it's very unlikely party state will change its color and become more like the West. But they seriously believed in that, and as a part of that, they're encouraging China to join WTO, for instance, giving most favored nation treatment, integrating with global market, even though it was not a market economy. There is today buyer's remorse in the West on this issue, but well, it's so much of history now. Likewise, Chinese narratives on some issues are accepted in a very unquestioning manner, and one can refer to whole construct of Silk Road. There was nothing like Silk Road until one Western scholar concocted the term sometime in 19th century. Or even the Middle Kingdom construct with its arrangement of tributary states. I don't know where India fits into that. But that is important because today China is arguing that its preeminence was a historical norm, that there was a hiatus caused by a century of humiliation, and what all it's trying to do is set right history and return to the historical norm. There is also an oft-repeated mistake of underestimating resilience of the party state. Its ability to sort of reassess and retool and deal with situations. And one example which is particularly relevant at this point of time is expectation Washington DC when President Donald Trump in his second term started waging a global tariff war and expected that China, like virtually all other countries, will cave in without putting serious resistance. But that wasn't the case. At one point of time, US tariffs on imports from China were 145%. China retaliated very strongly. It could do so because it was preparing very seriously since 2018, when Mr. Trump had first imposed tariffs on imports from China. And it had taken a series of steps. It had diversified its both exports and imports. It had built indigenous capabilities, especially in high-tech areas, where it had reduced its dependence on the US-led West. It had put in place a whole regime of sanctions and counter-sanctions, to some extent mimicking what USA had done. And it had carefully worked on vulnerabilities in the US system, Western system, which could be exploited. And in fact, the fact that China had carefully developed a stranglehold on rare earth magnets, rare earth elements, became a trump card, because it was controlling 90% of all processing of rare earth elements. So, after initial bravado, Mr. Trump blinked. China also blinked, but Trump blinked harder. But he's still seeking his beautiful deal with Mr. Xi. Now, the reason I am referring to that, during my last two visits to China, one in November last year, one in June this year, then there was the track 1.5 conversation 3 weeks ago, one could see a marked change in the mood in China. Above my interlocutors, I can't talk about the country as a whole. Last November, there was pervasive anxiety because they were not quite sure what's going to happen. Come June, they were cocky. Actually, it was verging on hubris, because they were convinced that they had the upper hand in the game of escalation dominance with the USA. They have sort of stared down USA. Now, that's a sort of dicey, risky position, because hubris in China, in fact, can be their undoing. and they can make serious mistakes when they are overconfident. And as Venkat rightly pointed out, today, they are no longer worried about those fine difference on 𝐈𝐍𝐾𝐔𝐆𝐔𝐑𝐀𝐢𝐻 and 𝐈𝐍𝐾𝐒𝐒𝐿, peaceful rise, peaceful development. In fact, in the dealings with EU, they have been really brusque, they have been aggressive. This is despite the fact that Chinese economy is going through a particularly difficult period, and we should have no doubt on that. Their economy is skating very close to deflation, and this is not my assessment, this is IMF assessment. Domestic demand is not picking up, so they are increasingly dependent on exports, which is one of the few bright spots in the economy. The exports, in fact, are still growing despite all tariffs. But last 2 months, August, September, the exports to the largest market, USA, contracted by 1/3. And the fact that this year, their trade surplus, if present trends continue, will exceed $1.2 trillion, is leading to pushback, because everyone is feeling threatened, developed and developing countries alike. Another mistake, which is important to take note of that, but this fallacy again is recurrent and fairly strong, is of China peaking. That there has been a lot of writing on that, books on that. That China has reached, sort of maximum extent of its development, and that it's going to either slow down very seriously, or perhaps some people have been predicting collapse of China for last 25 years. But what this hypothesis ignores is the capacity of the party state to come up with new engines of growth. And here we come to the special theme of this conference. Xi Jinping has a tech obsession. He really believes that innovation, is the answer. That's the future of Chinese economy, and he calls it strategic pillar. And increasingly, both rhetoric and policy architecture of the party state explicitly tie innovation to national security, supply chain resilience, and geopolitical influence. So it's a very important part of their the worldview and their development strategy. But there is another hypothesis. On one side, China is peaking. Other side, the rise of China is inexorable. This is something people like Michelle Wang and a whole lot of other people arguing that nothing can stop China. Just a question of time that China will emerge as the largest economy in the world. Earlier predictions were by 2028, 29, but they miss out on some basic facts. If you go by IMF data, China's GDP as percentage of US GDP actually peaked in 2021 at 76%. Last year it had come down to 64%, from 76 to 64. This year projections are 63%. There is a problem that both China and USA are convinced that other side is sort of has peaked and is in terminal decline. I'm not an economist, others have much better understanding, but I don't see USA, despite Mr. Trump, despite multiple dysfunctionalities, is a declining power yet. still has fair amount of growth momentum left, and that is reflected in the fact that actually its gap with the Chinese economy is increasing rather than decreasing. So our working hypothesis as we engage with China, as we deal with this challenge, should be that China, number one, is not a declining power, it's not peaking. Number two, its rise is not inexorable, that it will sweep everything in front of it. It may still stumble, but we should work on the assumption that it will continue to grow at progressively lower rates of growth. But from our perspective, the gap between GDPs of India and China will continue to expand for quite some time. Now, one more fallacy, which is again relevant to a special theme of this conference, is this facile argument advanced in the West that authoritarian societies do not innovate, that they are inherently incapable of innovating. Evidence suggests otherwise, both historical evidence and what we have today. Historical evidence, Sung period, there are people, circa 960 to 1279. This was period widely recognized as one of China's most inventive eras. I'm not going to details. There were very significant advances. They happened despite and perhaps because of strong centralized governance, elite control over liberal, over institutions. It was authoritarian regime, but in terms of innovation, a highly successful one. In some way, Xi Jinping and his cohort, they're emulating that model of state-led, state-promoted innovation, but it's not suppressing private sector. I'll come to that shortly. But it's a system where it's party state which decides the strategic objectives, and others have to subserve that objective. And the learning from history for Xi Jinping is very important. In fact, he keeps talking about all the time. So they are deploying really huge resources in innovation-led growth, and we are all aware of, I'm not going to specifics of what all they have achieved. There are bottlenecks, no doubt. They are flagging a reform process, over-reliance on government funding in state sector, technology denial regime of the USA and other Western countries, fragmentation in global technology networks, retarded globalization, which had benefited China and also India immensely, bias towards applied research as distinct from basic research. But despite that, if you just look at their achievements, like Bloomberg, there's a recent report that 13 critical areas they identified under Made in China 2025. In 12, they have made very impressive gains. You have ASPI, Critical Technology Tracker, Australian Strategic Policy Institute. Earlier, they used to lead in only 3 out of 64. The latest report of this year, they're leading 57 out of 64. USA leading only 7. To some extent, it might be exaggeration. West tends to exaggerate China's capability, plus some of the research takes outside public gaze. But there is no doubt about the fact that China has emerged as a very formidable innovation nation. And this is not just state laboratories we're talking about. In fact, bulk of patents, bulk of funding, in fact, is coming from private sector. So they have put in place a strategy which is sometimes called a leashed tiger. So private sector is given a whole lot of support, but it has to subserve larger strategic objectives of the party state. As long as it's doing that, it is encouraged. This can be double-edged in terms of consequences, because on one side, while China has been able to mobilize private sector ingenuity at scale, producing global champions in EVs, batteries, digital platforms, they've also created a whole lot of distortions in the economy. You have a situation of overcapacity in several sectors, very thin margin. In fact, solar panels, they dominate global supply chain, 90% control. All solar panel companies of China are losing money. So, you have this kind of situation, and also, climate of political compliance, which discourages risk-taking outside the state priorities. And also there are 2-3 things we need to take note of. People like Venkat, they've studied it much greater detail. To what extent innovation can substitute traditional drivers of growth, like real estate. Real estate at one point in time accounted for 28 to 30% GDP. There's a lot of study that, in fact, especially one Google study by 𝐈𝐍𝐀𝐔𝐆𝐔𝐑𝐀𝐋 and 𝐈𝐍𝐻. They also look at Japan, and they point out that Japan, in fact, when the period of stagnation started, in terms of innovation, they were doing quite well, but that didn't quite help them to bring back productivity. China also, innovation is not resulting in giving boost to productivity the way one expected. In fact, it's leading to all kind of distortions that we referred to. And here, this structural problem of chronic overcapacity. This is about how overcapacity is a problem not only for developed economies but for emerging economies like India, because sucking oxygen out of the system, leading to retarded industrialization. And they told me that you are parroting Western propaganda, a very sharp rejoinder. Now Xi Jinping is also parroting Western propaganda. Only thing that he doesn't call it overcapacity, he calls it mejon, that involution. But essentially same thing, that you are competing with each other in a very destructive manner, creating excess capacities. What he calls it blind expansion, irrational pricing, all kind of terminology. But roots are really in China's political economy, because local officials are rewarded for building industrial clusters as tax revenues accrue where goods are produced rather than where goods are consumed. So, this distinction, tax revenue accrue where goods are produced. So they want to produce more. And this is an old problem in Chinese economy. Production becomes more important. Consumption is less important. And especially after, land sale revenues collapsed in 2021, the real estate crisis started. So this has become very important for them to keep their revenue going. So this is not something which is going away. This will continue. Venkat referred to readout of 4th plenum of 20th Central Committee of Communist Party of China, which concluded yesterday. I've not seen the full readout, but media reports suggest that they're basically doubling down on this strategy, innovation-led, Xi Jinping repeatedly talks about the importance of real economy as distinct from virtual economy, and manufacturing, the importance of manufacturing. Now, they are already 1/3 of global manufacturing value added. How far can you go? But their appetite is insatiable, and this is backed up by a very huge price tag. 2 months ago, there was a detailed IMF study on support to industrial policy in China. It came to the conclusion that 4.5% of GDP is being devoted to support to industrial policy in China, and this was when they acknowledged that they could not factor in local government subsidies, government venture capital funds, below market borrowing, energy costs, implicit financial guarantees, and host of other ways party state was supporting. If you factor in, IMF didn't do that, but others have suggested that it could 7 to 8% of GDP. And you're looking at a GDP of $19 trillion. To some extent, it's wasteful. This tech obsession of China is returning in suboptimal returns, and also causing great deal of distortion in global marketplace, because we are going through what is being described as China Shock 2.0, wherein all these high-tech manufacturing, China is sort of dominating the entire space. Let me just, before I conclude, mention, because that's something we'll be discussing in much greater detail in panels, I'm sure. China is no longer content to be merely the world's workshop. It's now building a comprehensive export control regime that mirrors and in some respects exceeds the sophistication of the US export control regime. I'll not go into details, but 7 announcements which are made on 9th October, they're really dramatic, because one of the announcements is that if there's even 0.1% content of Chinese origin, say for instance, a rare earth element, you'll have to do full reporting, you'll have to take export license from China. So this kind of extraterritorial thing, which only Americans have done under the US foreign direct product rule, Chinese are replicating, and this is just one example. Objective is really strategic. It's not tactical. It's not just linked to their negotiations with USA, as some commentators in the West are suggesting. China is framing this as protecting the national security, preventing misuse of Chinese inputs, but the goals are to create geopolitical leverage, to safeguard China's technological edge in certain critical areas where they are ahead, and to constrain foreign competitors from developing in those areas by injecting uncertainty into supply chains. So it's a very carefully thought out strategy. Now, there are obvious implications for India. We'll be discussing greater details. I'll not go into too many specifics here, but we have to acknowledge that we face a neighbor that is more centralized, more resilient to external shocks. Look at the way they dealt with Trump 2.0, more assertive in leveraging economic power for geopolitical ends. The way they have developed the entire toolkit for weaponizing dependence, and we are very dependent on many critical imports from China. Their capacity to absorb trade wars, dominate critical technologies, weaponize supply chains, all this has very significant implications for us. And implications are immediate and sobering. It's already hurting us. In fact, there was a story in Economic Times a few days ago that 51 applications for release of rare earth magnets, the line pending with Chinese side for a long time, even though they have promised that they will release. And this is just one example. Now, China's excess capacity in whether it's solar panels or EVs or lithium-ion batteries, the ability to sell at a very low price, this is coming in the way of our hope of emerging as an important producer of those items, achieve scale in those items. So it's going to be a challenging proposition for us. Now, there are voices in India suggesting that we must collaborate more with China. In fact, last year, an economic survey released by Chief Economic Advisor, there was suggestion that we should be part of China-led supply chains. This year, I think there was rethinking on that. On the surface, possibilities appear very attractive. Access to scale, cost-competitive supply chains, exposure to advanced production ecosystems in sectors such as electric vehicles, batteries, solar panels, and so on. But the risks also profound. I'm not saying that we should not, collaborate, but we have to collaborate with our eyes open. We have to be very clear about the fact that China is extremely conservative now in transfer of technology. In fact, they have laid down elaborate regulations for that. And in some areas, they're mentioning India specifically, not officially, but in their informal advisories, EVs, for instance. So, getting technology from China will be difficult. For geopolitical reasons, they'll be reluctant to build capacities in India the way they have done in Thailand, Malaysia, or Vietnam. So we run the risk of getting low-cost products rather than becoming a genuine partner in setting up capability in India. But idea is to engage with them, push the envelope, see to what extent we can benefit from their expertise, because they need Indian market, especially when their access to US market, which is the largest market, has been affected. So that's a leverage we have, which we should deploy. My recommendation here will be that in our trade strategy, while we engage with China, we have to be extremely cautious. We need to deploy defensive instruments as we have done. There should be no hurry in jettisoning Press Note 3, under which all investment from China come under prior approval category, and we have to sort of persuade them to do something they have persuaded others to do. That if you want to get access to Indian market, you have to part with technology. You need to sort of do more meaningful value addition in India rather than just sending components and sub-components from China. And we should also learn from China's experience, especially the NH1 involution trap, where blind expansion in certain areas, we need to focus on quality and innovation, resilience of supply chain rather than just efficiency of supply chain, and our tasks become more difficult because actually we have to go through dual de-risking at this point of time. We are not only de-risking vis-a-vis China, but given uncertainties in the USA and our strategic engagement with that country, we'll have to be careful when we get into certain arrangements with USA. So managing, this both the exposure to Chinese overcapacity and US technology denial regimes and its tariffs is going to be very challenging perspective. And here I come back to the point we keep making all the time, and this is my final point, the imperative of Indian perspectives. And this is not just for, bilateral issues. I'm reading, an interview by Adam Tooze, an economic historian, and he spent a lot of time in China recently, and after that he was in a podcast. He was mentioning that China's developmental experience is the master key to understanding modernity. He called China the biggest laboratory of organized modernization there has ever been or ever will be at this level of organization. Maybe exaggerating, I don't know, but need to understand China phenomenon. Its granular detail is so important for us. As Professor I mentioned, understanding China is not optional, it's essential for us. We'll of course make mistakes in our assessment of China, as Western scholars, academics, diplomats have done, but they'll be our mistake. So we should make our own mistakes rather than just copying someone else's mistake. And a few good things from China we must know. China may be overbetting on innovation, on R&D, is overdoing. But we are definitely underbetting on innovation, R&D. And you look at the numbers, 2.7% GDP last year, the R&D intensity. Ours is still about 0.64 or so. So this global innovation index, this year they reached 10th. We are still 38. And also, this is my final point I would like to make, is really posing a question. What do we want to be? And I was, struck with this question 2 weeks ago. I was reading this lead article in The Economist. It was talking about why, US AI companies are interested in India. And the clinching argument was this, I'm quoting, as other sources of fresh data run dry, the potential fire hose in India is a prize few AI firms can ignore. So they want to come to India, according to this story, so they can get access to data in India. Now, is that something they should be? I'm reminded of what Dadabhai Naoroji had said, in context of colonial subjugation of India. He had posed this question: do we let India remain hewers of wood and drawers of water? I think same applies to us in technology space today. Are we really harnessing our human talent or hankering for H-1B visa? Are we really harnessing data generated by 900 million internet users in India? Indian firms scale at delivering larger scale coding, back office processing, IT support, these are all critical services. Indian technical contributions, I shouldn't be saying this, I am, because I'm ignorant about these issues, but I feel that India's technical contributions feed innovation abroad, but seldom translate into a self-sustaining, high-impact ecosystem at home. How do we change that? I think that's one issue. Perhaps there are some answers in China's story. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for that thought-provoking and enriching address. Your reflections on the challenges and opportunities in the India-China dynamic has given us much to ponder and discuss throughout the conference.
We would now like to invite Dr. Aravind Yelleri, co-convenor of the 18th All India Conference of China Studies, to deliver the vote of thanks. Dr. Yelleri, faculty of the Jawaharlal Nehru University, is an accomplished scholar and a key contributor to this conference's ongoing success. Formerly, he was a senior research fellow at Peking University, Beijing, Dr. Yellery was a visiting faculty at the Fudan School of Management, Shanghai, National Taiwan University, Taipei, and Taiwan MOFA Fellow 2022. Before joining PKU, he was also an Associate Fellow and Assistant Director at the Institute of Chinese Studies, Delhi. Dr. Yellery holds a PhD in Chinese Studies with a particular interest in political economy. He has co-edited a book titled Tailspin, The Politics of India-China Economic Relations, and recently authored China in Cooperation Between State Capitalism and Economic Statecraft. Sir, we are grateful to have you here with us today, and we invite you to deliver the vote of thanks.
Good morning, everyone. Dignitaries at the dais, Professor Rai, Alka ma'am, Ambassador Kant, and my dear friend Venkat. On behalf of the organizing committee, it is my privilege to deliver the vote of thanks for this remarkable conference. First and foremost, I extend our heartfelt gratitude to Professor Himanshu Rai, Director of IIM Indore, for his wholehearted support and forthrightness in facilitating this conference. So your visionary leadership and commitment to interdisciplinary research, your commitment to outstanding professional deliverables, and your collaborations are not only inspiring but also provide the guiding framework that made hosting this event possible. I would also like to thank Professor 𝐒𝐄𝐒, Honorable Director of the ICS, whose encouragement and guidance have been a pillar of support and inspiration to every China scholar. Professor Acharya has recently completed her outstanding teaching career at JNU, serving as Professor and Chairperson of the Center for East Asian Studies at SAIS. The organizers are deeply grateful to the ICS Fellows Council for endorsing the idea of hosting the 18th edition of AICCS at IIM Indore. It is indeed a pleasure to have Professor Srimati Chakrabarti, Chairman of ICS, present among us, and we also express our sincere thanks for her continued support and selfless dedication in curating and guiding China scholars. As conveners and organizers, we must acknowledge the MEA's Policy Planning and Research Division for funding this project and taking this significant step to encourage research and scholarship on China. A special mention to Ms. Aparna Ray, JSPPNR, who generous support and was instrumental in bringing this exceptional national event to life. A special note of gratitude to Ms. Shivani Chival, USPPNR, for her invaluable guidance and insightful contribution. Our gratitude also goes to Indian Council for Social Science Research, ICSSR, for providing crucial conference funding which has made this gathering possible. A special word of thanks must go to Professor Venkataraman, my senior, my colleague and dearest friend, whose vision and dedication has enabled the wiring of this conference. You have seen how he was very emotional when he was thanking and taking names over here. From conceptualizing to bringing together funding bodies and multiple stakeholders, Professor Raman has provided this forum with renewed recognition. His path-breaking research and distinguished reputation in Chinese studies make him invaluable guide and mentor for all of us, including me. Events of this magnitude require meticulous planning and precise execution, and our success owes much to such commitment, be it logistics, designs, housekeeping, estate, food and catering, communications, stage and equipment, printing and publication, etc. We would like to acknowledge every department of IIM Indore for going the extra mile to make this event inclusive, well-coordinated, and truly successful. I must especially mention Dr. Snigdha Konar, Assistant Director ICS, who handled the ICS side of coordination flawlessly and ensured seamless collaboration with IIM Indore team. Her effort exemplified her dedication here to bring such a complex event to fruition. We are also grateful to Mr. P.R. Singh, Program Officer, for his continued support and assistance throughout the process. I must thank each of the distinguished speakers who is present here, panelists, delegates, and participants. Your engagement, insights, and contributions will truly enrich the discussions and make this conference a resounding success. We must also thank the Chief Administrative Officer Gopinath Ramagi in his contribution make this entire organization possible. Finally, I must thank the entire team of young rapporteurs, the volunteers who are going to contribute to make this entire event successful. Let us all look forward to continuing the dialogue initiated here, to advancing the scholarship and policy discourse on China in a multipolar world over the next 3 days of engagements. Thank you once again to everyone who made this conference possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Yalavi, for your gracious acknowledgements and for your valuable contribution in organizing this event with such excellence.
We now come to a moment of gratitude and appreciation. As a gesture of respect and acknowledgement, we would like to felicitate our esteemed guests. We request Director Sir to kindly present a symbol of gratitude to former Ambassador Mr. Ashok Kanta. And now, Sir, requesting you to present the token to ICS Director, Professor 𝐈𝐍𝐀𝐃 Acharya. Thank you, sir.
We now request Professor 𝐈𝐍𝐀𝐃 Acharya to kindly present the token of appreciation to Professor Rai as a mark of respect and mutual collaboration between IIM Indore and the Institute of Chinese Studies. Thank you, ma'am, for that gracious gesture.
Now, let us rise together in unity and pride for our national anthem.
अधिनायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड उत्कल गंगा विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्चल जलधि तरंगा तव शुभ नामे जागे तव शुभ आशीष मांगे गाहे तव जय गाथा जन गण मंगलदायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता जय हे जय हे जय हे जय 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 हे